I've been on the road for 18 hours straight. My back is screaming, my eyes are burning, and I've had nothing but gas station coffee and stale donuts since I left Council Bluffs yesterday afternoon. But none of that matters because in 20 minutes, I'm going to watch my daughter graduate from college. My daughter, Bryn, the first person in our family to get a degree. The girl I've worked myself to the bone for since her father died 8 years ago. I'm Margaret Hale, 52 years old, widow, waitress at a diner where I've pulled double shifts for 4 years straight just to keep her in school. Every penny of my dead husband's life insurance went to her education. Every tip I've ever made. Every birthday, every Christmas, every moment of my life since she left for Massachusetts has been about making sure she had what I never did, a chance. I pull into the UMass Amherst parking lot at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday. The graduation is tomorrow morning. I made it. I actually made it. My hands are shaking as I text her. I'm here. Can't wait to see you. 20 minutes pass, then 40. When she finally shows up, she's with 2 friends. Girls in expensive clothes I know I didn't buy. Girls who look at my beat-up Honda like it's something diseased. Mom, Bryn says, and there's something wrong with her voice. Something cold. What are you doing here? The question hits me like a slap. What do you mean? I'm here for your graduation, baby. I drove all night. Oh. She glances at her friends. I see something pass between them. Pity. Embarrassment. Mom, graduation was yesterday. They moved it up because of the weather. I forgot to tell you. The world stops. You forgot. Yeah, it slipped my mind. Sorry. The word comes out flat. Mocking, almost. Like she's sorry she forgot to pick up milk. Not sorry she let me drive 900 miles for nothing. Mom, I gotta go. We have dinner reservations. I'll call you later, okay? And just like that, she's walking away. Laughing with her friends. Like I'm not standing there with my heart in pieces. Like I didn't just spend 18 hours behind the wheel thinking about nothing but seeing her face. I get back in my car. I sit there as the sun sets. I don't cry. Not yet. I drive to the Motel 6 I booked. $49 I can't afford. The room smells like smoke and regret. I lie on the scratchy bedspread, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand when my daughter started to hate me. The next morning, my phone explodes with calls. Not apologies. Not, I'm sorry, Mom. Not, are you okay? Just Bryn, screaming at me because I canceled the payment for her graduation party. $500 I'd promised to wire her for some trendy restaurant celebration with her friends. What the hell, Mom? Everyone's asking me what happened. This is so embarrassing. Embarrassing. I drove 18 hours and she's embarrassed about a canceled party payment. Do you have any idea what it took for me to get here? My voice is shaking. I worked triple shifts for 3 months to save for this trip. I didn't ask you to do that. You just decided to, and now you're holding it over my head. I'm not holding anything over your head. I'm hurt that you forgot to tell me about your own graduation. It was an accident. Was it? Or did you just not want me there? Silence. The kind of silence that answers questions you didn't want to ask. You know what? Forget it, she says finally. I don't need your help. I'll figure it out myself. She hangs up. I stand there in that ugly motel room, and something inside me breaks. Not the dramatic kind of breaking, the quiet kind. The kind that happens when you finally understand that the person you've sacrificed everything for doesn't want your sacrifice. Doesn't want you. I pack my bag, I check out. I start the long drive back to Iowa. But on the drive home, somewhere around Pennsylvania, I make a decision. I open my banking app and I do something I've never done before. I cancel every automatic payment I'd set up for her. The security deposit for her new apartment in Boston. The first month's rent I'd promised to help with. All of it. My phone blows up with texts. From Bryn. From her friends asking on her behalf. Everyone wants to know what happened to the money. Nobody asks if I made it home safely. When I finally pull into my driveway in Council Bluffs 2 days later, exhausted and hollowed out, there's a message from a number I don't recognize. Hi, this is Amanda, Bryn's friend. She wants to know if you're still planning to help with her security deposit for the Boston apartment. She needs to know by tomorrow. She didn't even call herself. She sent a friend to ask me for money. I sit in my car in my own driveway and I realize something. I've been so busy trying to give my daughter everything that I forgot to make sure she actually wanted me. And now I don't know if it's too late to fix it, or if I even should try. Because here's what nobody tells you about being a mother. Sometimes you can do everything right and still lose them. Sometimes sacrifice isn't enough. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the distance between you and your child isn't measured in miles. It's measured in all the moments they stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as an obligation. And I don't know how to bridge that distance. I don't know if Bryn even wants me to try. All I know is that I drove 18 hours to watch my daughter graduate from college, and she couldn't even be bothered to tell me I'd missed it. So now I have to decide, do I keep fighting for a relationship she clearly doesn't want? Or do I finally let go? The phone rings again. It's her. And I'm staring at her name on the screen, and I don't know if I should answer. Because whatever I say next is going to determine whether we have any relationship at all. And I'm terrified of getting it wrong. The highway stretched ahead like a promise I wasn't sure would be kept. Mile marker 312 flashed past my window, somewhere deep in Nebraska, where the land rolls flat and endless, and the sky presses down so heavy you can feel it in your chest. I'd been driving for 11 hours straight, and my lower back had that deep, grinding ache that no amount of shifting in the seat could fix. The coffee in my cup holder had gone cold 2 hours ago, but I took another sip anyway. It tasted like burnt rubber and regret, which seemed fitting. That's what you get at a Flying J at 3 in the morning when you're the only customer and the kid behind the counter looks at you with those dead eyes that say he's wondering what kind of life leads a middle-aged woman to be buying gas station coffee in the middle of nowhere. I'm Margaret Hale, 52 years old, widow, waitress at Rosie's Diner back in Council Bluffs, Iowa, where I've worked the early shift for the past 6 years, 4 a.m. to noon, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 when Linda calls in sick, which is often. My hands smell permanently of coffee and bacon grease, and there's a permanent divot in my right hip from carrying heavy trays. I've got exactly $247 in my checking account after this trip, and that needs to last me until next Friday's paycheck. But none of that mattered right now, because I was going to see my daughter graduate from college. Bryn Marie Hale, 22 years old, bachelor's degree in communications from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. The first person in our family to finish college. The first person in our family to even go to college, if I'm being honest. Thomas and I were both high school educated. Him with barely passing grades because he spent more time working his dad's farm than studying. Me with decent marks but no money for anything beyond that. I glanced at the photo I'd taped to my dashboard 3 years ago when she first left for school. Bryn at 18, standing in front of our house on Willow Street, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing the UMass sweatshirt I'd bought her. She was smiling, but it was that tight smile she'd developed sometime around her sophomore year of high school. The one that didn't quite reach her eyes. The one that said she was tolerating the photo rather than enjoying it. When had that started? The distance between us? I tried to pinpoint the exact moment, but it was like trying to catch water in your hands. It just slipped through, leaving you with nothing but the dampness to prove it had been there at all. Maybe it started when Thomas died. God, that was 8 years ago now. 8 years since I got the call from Bill Morrison saying there'd been an accident at the grain elevator. Thomas had been doing maintenance work, and something had gone wrong with the ventilation system. By the time they got him out, he'd been overcome by the fumes. He died in the ambulance before it even reached the hospital. Bryn was 14, a freshman in high school. I remember how she'd taken the news, standing in our kitchen, still in her volleyball uniform from practice, her face going pale and then blank, like someone had reached inside her and turned off all the lights. She didn't cry at the funeral. She just stood there in the black dress we'd bought at JCPenney, holding my hand with fingers that felt like ice. I thought we'd grieve together. I thought losing Thomas would bring us closer, the way tragedy is supposed to bind people. But instead, it was like he'd been this bridge between us, and when he collapsed, the bridge went with him. The wind buffeted my Honda, and I tightened my grip on the wheel. It was an R09 Civic with 184,000 miles on it. The check engine light had been on for 6 months, but Eddie at the garage said it was just a sensor malfunction. Nothing to worry about. I hoped he was right. I couldn't afford a breakdown. Not now. Not on this trip. I passed another truck, one of those massive 18-wheelers hauling God knows what across the country. The driver was just a silhouette in the cab, probably as tired as I was, probably wondering about his own family, his own kids, whether they appreciated what he was doing out here on the road. Did Bryn appreciate what I'd done? The question sat in my stomach like spoiled milk. I didn't want to think it. What kind of mother questions whether her daughter appreciates her sacrifices? But it was there, nagging at me, especially in the quiet hours of the morning when there was nothing to distract me from my own thoughts. The life insurance from Thomas's death had been $25,000. Not much, but it was something. I'd put 15 of it toward Bryn's college fund immediately. The rest went to paying off the mortgage on our little house. A 3-bedroom ranch with vinyl siding and a yard that was more weeds than grass. I'd wanted Bryn to have something, to not have to worry about rent or where she'd live if something happened to me. But $15,000 only covered her first year. After that, it was my tips, my wages, and student loans in her name that I promised I'd help her pay back. I picked up every shift I could. I stopped buying new clothes. I learned to cut my own hair watching YouTube videos in the bathroom. I ate the leftover soup and day-old bread from the diner instead of buying groceries. And she'd gotten into UMass. A good school. Not Harvard or Yale, but good. Respectable. The kind of place where the buildings had names like Herder Hall and Goodell Building, where kids walked around with MacBooks and talked about internships in Boston and New York. I'd driven out to help her move in freshman year. It had been a long trip then, too, but I'd been excited, energized by the idea of seeing where my daughter would spend the next 4 years. We'd unpacked her things in a cramped dorm room she shared with a girl from Connecticut, whose parents had shown up in a BMW SUV with boxes from Pottery Barn. I'd felt out of place even then. The other parents were younger, better dressed, more confident. They talked about their summer homes and their kids' gap years in Europe. I'd smiled and nodded and tried to ignore the way Bryn kept glancing at me like she wished I'd blend into the wallpaper. That was when I'd met her roommate's mother, a woman named Patricia with perfect blonde highlights and a Tory Burch bag. She'd asked me what I did, and I'd said I was a waitress, and she'd given me this smile, this pitying smile, and said, "How wonderful that you're making this work. Making this work." Like I was some charity case. Like my daughter being here was some kind of miracle instead of the result of years of 60-hour work weeks and eating ramen so she could have the good cereal. I'd left that weekend feeling smaller than I'd arrived. The calls had been frequent at first. Bryn would call every few days, telling me about her classes, her new friends, the cafeteria food that wasn't as bad as everyone said. I'd listen and ask questions and feel grateful that we still had this connection. But over time, the calls had gotten shorter, less frequent. By sophomore year, it was once a week, and I was usually the one initiating. By junior year, it was every other week, and half the time she'd say she was busy, she'd call me back, and then she wouldn't. I told myself it was normal. She was growing up, becoming independent. That's what kids did. That's what college was for. But it hurt anyway. It hurt in that quiet way that doesn't announce itself, that just sits in your chest and makes it a little harder to breathe. I checked my phone, mounted on a dashboard holder I'd bought at Walmart, and saw it was 6:23 a.m. The sun was starting to come up, turning the sky that particular shade of pink and gold that makes everything look hopeful. I'd been on the road since noon yesterday. 18 hours with stops only for gas and bathroom breaks, and that one time I'd pulled into a rest area and dozed for 45 minutes because my eyes wouldn't stay open anymore. I was running on fumes, but I'd make it. I had to make it. The graduation ceremony was tomorrow, Saturday, at 10 in the morning. I'd arrive today, check into the motel I'd booked online, maybe take a hot shower and a nap, and then I'd text Bryn to let her know I was in town. Maybe we'd get dinner. Maybe we'd talk, really talk, the way we used to when she was little and would sit at the kitchen table doing homework while I made meatloaf, telling me about her day in that rambling way kids have where everything is important and nothing is too small to share. I missed that version of her. I missed that version of us. The highway sign said I was 130 miles from the Iowa-Illinois border. Once I crossed into Illinois, it'd be another few hours to Chicago, then across Indiana, a slice of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and finally into Massachusetts. I'd mapped it all out on Google before I left, written the directions on a piece of paper just in case my phone died. I passed a billboard for a megachurch, one of those places with the stadium seating and the rock band worship music. "Find your purpose," it said in giant letters over a picture of a diverse group of people with their hands raised. I thought about the little Catholic church back home, St. Mary's, where Thomas and I used to take Bryn when she was small. We hadn't been regular churchgoers, more like Christmas and Easter Catholics. But there was something comforting about the ritual of it, the stained glass and the hymns and the smell of incense. After Thomas died, I'd gone more often. Not every week, but some weeks. I'd sit in the back pew and light a candle for him and say a prayer I wasn't sure anyone was listening to. Bryn had stopped going entirely, said she didn't see the point, said if God was real, he wouldn't have let Dad die like that. I hadn't known how to argue with her. How do you defend God to a 14-year-old who just lost her father? My phone buzzed with a text. I glanced at it, couldn't help myself. even though I knew I shouldn't look while driving. It was from Linda at the diner. "Have a great time, hon. Bryn's lucky to have you." I felt a swell of affection for Linda, who'd been covering my shifts all week without complaint. She had 3 kids of her own and understood what it meant to move heaven and earth for them. I typed back quickly at the next stoplight. "Thanks, Elle. You're the best." The light turned green, and I pressed the gas. The Honda hesitated for just a second. It had been doing that lately, that little stutter before it caught. And then we were moving again. I thought about what I'd wear to the graduation. I'd brought 2 outfits, a navy dress I'd bought on clearance at Kohl's 3 years ago, and a nicer pantsuit I'd found at Goodwill that only had one small stain on the sleeve that I'd managed to get out with some determined scrubbing. I'd gone with the pantsuit. It seemed more appropriate, more put together. I wanted Bryn to be proud of me when I sat in those bleachers with all the other parents. I wanted her to look up into the crowd and see me there and smile. A real smile. The kind she used to give me when she was little and I'd show up to her school plays or volleyball games. That smile that said, "I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're my mom." When was the last time she'd smiled at me like that? I couldn't remember. The miles rolled on. Illinois gave way to Indiana. The landscape changed. More trees now, less flatness. The highway cutting through hills and past small towns with grain silos and Dollar Generals. I saw signs for places like Gary and Fort Wayne, cities I'd never been to and probably never would be. My back was screaming now. I tried rolling my shoulders, arching my spine against the seat, but nothing helped. I'd be paying for this drive for days, I knew. My body wasn't built for this kind of endurance anymore. But I'd do it. I'd do it 100 times over if it meant seeing my daughter graduate. Around 2 in the afternoon, I stopped at a McDonald's just outside of Toledo. I ordered a small fries and a water, couldn't afford much more, and sat in a booth by the window, watching families come and go. A young mother with a toddler who was having a meltdown over a toy. An elderly couple sharing a meal in comfortable silence. A group of teenagers being too loud, the way teenagers always are. I wondered what Bryn was doing right now. Was she nervous about tomorrow? Excited? Was she with friends, getting ready for whatever pre-graduation festivities they had planned? Had she thought about me at all? I pushed the thought away. That wasn't fair. She was busy. She was living her life. That's what I'd raised her to do. I finished my fries, greasy and salty and exactly what I needed, and got back on the road. Pennsylvania was a blur. I'd been through this state twice now. Once when I'd helped Bryn move in, once when I'd picked her up for Christmas break sophomore year, and both times I'd been struck by how green it was, how the highways cut through forests and farmland that looked nothing like Iowa. By the time I crossed into Massachusetts, it was after 7 p.m., and the sun was starting to set. The landscape changed again. More cities now, more traffic, the aggressive kind of driving where people switched lanes without signaling and honked if you weren't going 10 over the speed limit. I gripped the wheel tighter and tried not to let it rattle me. The GPS, my phone propped on the dashboard, told me I was 40 minutes from Amherst. 40 minutes from seeing Bryn. My heart did this little stutter step thing, somewhere between excitement and anxiety. I pulled into the UMass campus just before 8. The visitors' parking lot was half empty, which was good. I wouldn't have to circle looking for a spot. I parked under a streetlight, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, letting the silence wash over me. I'd made it. 18 hours of driving, and I'd made it. I pulled down the visor and checked my reflection in the little mirror. I looked terrible, hair flat on one side from leaning against the headrest, eyes bloodshot, skin pale and tired. I dug through my purse for some concealer, dabbed it under my eyes, ran my fingers through my hair to fluff it up a bit. Better. Not great, but better. I grabbed my overnight bag from the trunk and headed toward Bryn's dorm, a 4-story brick building with ivy climbing the walls. It looked exactly like what I'd imagined college to look like when I was young and stupid and thought maybe I'd go someday. The campus was beautiful. Tree-lined paths, old buildings with white columns, students walking around in groups looking relaxed and happy. Finals were over. Graduation was tomorrow. This was the good part, the celebration part. I pulled out my phone and texted Bryn, "I'm here, in the parking lot by your dorm, can't wait to see you." I waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. I tried calling. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. "Hey honey, it's Mom. I'm here on campus. Just let me know when you're free and I'll come find you. Love you." I walked around a bit, stretching my legs, trying to work out the stiffness in my back. Students passed by, laughing and talking, some carrying boxes, others just lounging on the grass, enjoying the warm evening. Nobody looked at me. I was invisible here, just another middle-aged woman who didn't belong. My phone buzzed. Finally. Oh hey, give me like 30 mine, meeting W friends. Meeted by the student center? Not quite the enthusiastic greeting I'd hoped for, but okay. She was busy. That was fine. I found the student center, a modern building with lots of glass, and sat on a bench outside. My legs were grateful for the rest. I watched students come and go, tried to imagine Bryn walking these paths every day, living this life I'd never lived. 45 minutes later, I saw her. She was walking across the quad with 2 other girls, all 3 of them dressed in expensive-looking clothes. Those effortless outfits that probably cost more than my car payment. Bryn's hair was different. Longer, with those caramel highlights that must have cost a fortune. She'd lost weight too. Gotten thinner in that way girls do when they're trying to look like Instagram models. She looked beautiful. She looked like a stranger. "Mom," she said when she reached me. Not mom, with an exclamation point. Just mom, flat and neutral, like she was reading my name off a list. I stood up, went to hug her. She gave me one of those half hugs where your bodies barely touch, the kind you give acquaintances at church functions. "Hi, baby," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "It's so good to see you. You look wonderful." "Thanks." She glanced at her friends, then back at me. "So, what are you doing here?" The question hit me like cold water. "What do you mean?" "I'm here for your graduation, sweetie. I drove all night." "Oh." Her face did something I couldn't quite read. "Oh, Mom, graduation was yesterday." The world tilted. I actually felt dizzy for a second, like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. "What?" "Yeah, they moved it up because of the weather, supposed to storm today. I meant to text you, but..." She shrugged. It slipped my mind. Sorry. The word hung in the air between us, casual and meaningless, like she'd forgotten to pick up milk at the store. "You forgot to tell me." "It's not that big of a deal, Mom. It's just a ceremony. I already got my diploma and everything." One of her friends, the blonde one in the Lululemon, tugged on Bryn's sleeve. "Babe, we're gonna be late for dinner, Rez." "Yeah, I gotta go," Bryn said, already turning away. "We have this whole celebration thing planned. I'll call you later, okay?" And just like that, she was walking away. Just like that, after I'd driven 18 hours, after I'd spent everything I had to get here, after I'd thought about nothing but this moment for months. I stood there in the twilight, my overnight bag heavy in my hand, and watched my daughter disappear across the quad with her friends, laughing at something one of them said. I didn't move for a long time. I couldn't. My body felt like it was made of lead. A campus security guard passed by and asked if I was okay, and I heard myself say yes, even though I wasn't. Even though nothing was okay. I walked back to my car in the dark, got in, sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. She forgot. She forgot to tell me. The drive here had taken 18 hours. The pain took about 18 seconds to really hit. And when it did, it was like something inside me cracked clean through. I didn't drive to the Motel 6 right away. I couldn't. I just sat in that parking lot as the sky turned from purple to black, watching students stream past my car on their way to Friday night parties, to celebrations, to lives that had nothing to do with me. My phone sat in the cup holder, silent. Bryn hadn't called. Of course she hadn't. Around 9:30, I finally turned the key and drove to the motel. It was one of those budget places off the highway. 2 stories, exterior corridors, a flickering sign that said vacancy in red letters. The room cost $49 a night, which was $49 I couldn't really afford, but I'd booked it anyway because I'd thought I'd be too tired after the drive to turn around immediately. The room smelled like cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. The bedspread had that rough, worn texture that comes from being washed 1,000 times. There was a painting on the wall, one of those mass-produced things of a lighthouse on a rocky coast, and a TV bolted to the dresser. I set my overnight bag on the bed and stood there in the harsh fluorescent light, not sure what to do with myself. I should shower, I should sleep, I should eat something. I'd barely eaten all day except those McDonald's fries. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my phone. I scrolled through my photos, looking for pictures of Bryn. There weren't many recent ones. She'd stopped sending me photos sometime junior year. But I had older ones. Bryn at 6, missing her front teeth, holding up a drawing she'd made in 1st grade. Bryn at 12, in her volleyball uniform, mid-jump at the net. Bryn at 16, the day she got her driver's license, standing next to Thomas's old truck that we'd given her. Thomas. God, I wished he were here. He'd know what to say. He'd know how to make sense of this. I lay back on the bed, still in my clothes, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache. My eyes burned with exhaustion, but every time I closed them, I saw Bryn's face. That casual shrug, that empty, sorry. It slipped my mind. How do you forget to tell your mother about your own graduation? Unless you didn't want her there. The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. I rolled onto my side, pulled my knees up to my chest, and finally let myself cry. Not the quiet, dignified tears I'd shed at Thomas's funeral. These were ugly sobs, the kind that make your whole body shake, the kind that come from somewhere deep and raw. I cried for the 18 hours I'd spent driving. I cried for the money I'd spent on this motel room. I cried for every shift I'd worked, every bill I'd paid, every sacrifice I'd made that Bryn would never know about and apparently wouldn't care about even if she did. But mostly, I cried because my daughter didn't want me there. And I didn't know when that had started or how to fix it. Eventually, I ran out of tears. I lay there in the dark, listening to the sounds of the motel, people in other rooms, cars pulling in and out of the parking lot, the hum of the ice machine down the hallway. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, light was streaming through the gap in the curtains, and my phone was ringing. I fumbled for it, disoriented, my mouth dry, and my head pounding. The screen said 9:47 a.m., Saturday morning, graduation day. Except there was no graduation, was there? That had been yesterday. The caller ID said, Bryn. I stared at it for 3 rings, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail. Part of me wanted to hear her voice, wanted her to say it was all a mistake, wanted her to beg me to stay. I answered. Hello? What the hell, Mom? Her voice was sharp, angry. No greeting, no good morning, just immediate accusation. I sat up, my back protesting. Bryn? What? You canceled the payment for my party. Are you serious right now? The party. I'd completely forgotten about the party. She'd asked me 2 weeks ago if I could help pay for a celebration dinner at some restaurant in Northampton, one of those trendy places with small plates and craft cocktails. $500. I'd said yes because I always said yes, because saying no to Bryn felt like admitting I'd failed as a mother. But sometime yesterday, sitting in that parking lot after she'd walked away from me, I'd logged into my bank app and canceled the transfer. Mom, everyone's asking me what happened. Do you know how embarrassing this is? Embarrassing. The word came out flat. I was too tired for anger yet. It would come later, I knew. But right now, I just felt hollow. I drove 18 hours to see you graduate, Bryn. And I told you it was yesterday. I said I was sorry. You said it slipped your mind. What do you want me to say? I forgot. People forget things. I stood up, started pacing the small room. My legs were stiff. My back was killing me, but I couldn't sit still. Do you have any idea what it took for me to get here? I worked double shifts for 3 months to save up for this trip. I drove all night. I didn't ask you to do that. The words stopped me cold. What? I didn't ask you to drive here. You just decided to do it. That's not my fault. You're my daughter. You graduated from college. Of course I was going to come. Well, you missed it. So I guess that's that. Her voice was hard now, defensive. But that doesn't mean you get to punish me by canceling the party. That's so petty, Mom. Petty. She thought I was being petty. Something inside me shifted. The hollowness filled with something else. Something hot and sharp and years in the making. Do you know how much money I've spent on your education, Bryn? Oh my God, here we go. Do you? My voice was rising now. I couldn't stop it. $15,000 from your father's life insurance. Every penny I could scrape together from tips. I haven't bought myself new clothes in 3 years. I cut my own hair. I eat leftover soup from the diner because I can't afford groceries. Also, you could go to this school so you could have opportunities I never had. Nobody asked you to martyr yourself. She was shouting now, too. Nobody asked you to sacrifice everything and then hold it over my head. I'm not holding it over your head. I'm trying to make you understand. Understand what? That you've been miserable for 4 years and it's somehow my fault? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying, Mom? Because it sounds a lot like you're blaming me for having a life. I'm not blaming you for having a life. I'm hurt that I'm apparently not part of it. There was a pause. I could hear voices in the background on her end, her friends probably, wondering what was taking so long. When Bryn spoke again, her voice was colder, controlled. You know what? I can't do this right now. I have people here. We're supposed to be celebrating. Celebrating? I laughed and it came out bitter. Right. Well, don't let me keep you. Are you seriously doing this right now? Doing what? Being upset that my daughter forgot to tell me about her graduation? That she doesn't seem to care that I drove 900 miles to be there for her? I said I was sorry. No, you said sorry like you forgot to return a library book. There's a difference. What do you want from me, Mom? Her voice cracked slightly. You want me to grovel? You want me to feel guilty for living my life? I want you to care. The words came out quieter than I intended. I want you to care that I'm here, that I tried, that I've always tried. Another pause. Longer this time. I have to go, she said finally. My friends are waiting. Of course they are. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Go. Celebrate with your friends. I'll drive home. You're leaving? What else am I supposed to do? The graduation is over. You clearly don't want me here. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I heard her take a breath like she was going to say something else, but then there was a voice in the background. That blonde friend, probably, saying something about mimosas and brunch reservations. I have to go, Bryn said again. We'll talk later. Sure, I said, but I didn't believe it. Later. She hung up without saying goodbye. I stood there holding my phone, feeling like I'd just gone 10 rounds with someone twice my size. My hands were shaking. My throat was tight. I should pack. I should check out of this motel and start the long drive home. But I couldn't move. I just stood there in that ugly room with its cigarette smell and its lighthouse painting, wondering how my relationship with my daughter had ended up here. When had it started to fall apart? I sat back down on the bed and forced myself to think about it. Really think about it. Not just gloss over the uncomfortable parts the way I usually did. The truth was, it hadn't been good for a while. Years, maybe. I'd been telling myself it was just normal teenage stuff, normal college-age separation. But it was more than that, wasn't it? I thought about the summer after her freshman year. She'd come home for 3 months, and it had been tense from the start. She'd complained about everything. The house was too small. Council Bluffs was too boring. There was nothing to do. She'd gotten a job at the mall, spent all her time with friends I didn't know, came home late smelling like beer. We'd fought about it. I'd said she was being disrespectful, that she needed to follow my rules if she was going to live under my roof. She'd said I was being controlling, that she was an adult now, that I needed to let her make her own choices. It had ended with her spending most of that summer sleeping at friends' houses, avoiding me. Sophomore year, she'd stayed at school for the summer, said she'd gotten an internship, needed to build her resume. I'd been disappointed but tried to be supportive. I'd called her every week. The calls had gotten shorter and shorter. Junior year, she'd come home for Christmas but not Thanksgiving. Said she was going to her friend's family's house in Connecticut. I'd spent Thanksgiving alone, eating a Hungry Man turkey dinner and watching football. This past Christmas, she'd only stayed 3 days. Said she had to get back for some project. We'd barely talked. She'd spent most of the time on her phone or out with old friends from high school. And now this. The ultimate rejection. She'd forgotten to tell me about her own graduation. Or had she? The thought came unbidden, cruel. Had she really forgotten? Or had she just not wanted me there? I picked up my phone and opened Facebook, something I rarely did. But Bryn had tagged me in a few things over the years. I navigated to her profile. It was mostly private, but I could see her profile picture. Bryn with a group of friends, all dressed up, clearly at some kind of party. The caption said, Grad Week, posted 3 days ago. I clicked through to the few public posts. Photos of her with friends at restaurants I couldn't afford. Photos of her in nice clothes I didn't recognize. Photos of her at parties and bars and beach trips that she'd never mentioned to me. There was one photo from yesterday, graduation day. Bryn in her cap and gown, surrounded by friends, all of them beaming. The caption, We did it, class of 2025, 63 likes, dozens of comments. So proud of you. You look amazing. Can't believe we made it. I scrolled through the comments. I wasn't tagged. Nobody had mentioned me. It was like I didn't exist. I closed the app and set my phone down, feeling sick. This wasn't new. This wasn't sudden. This had been building for years, and I'd been too busy working, too busy surviving, too busy telling myself everything was fine to notice. Or maybe I had noticed. Maybe I'd just been too scared to acknowledge it. I thought about calling her back. I thought about apologizing, about saying I'd reinstate the party payment, about begging her to let me take her to lunch before I left. But I was so tired. Tired of trying. Tired of being the one who always reached out. Tired of feeling like I was bothering her just by existing. I packed my bag, I checked out of the motel. The clerk, a young guy with acne and a Red Sox cap, asked if I'd enjoyed my stay, and I said yes because it was easier than explaining. I got in my car and sat there for a minute, looking at the route on my phone. 900 miles back to Council Bluffs. 18 hours if I drove straight through. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. I'd stop somewhere for the night, break it up, make it easier on my body. Before I pulled out of the parking lot, I opened my bank app one more time. The $500 was still in my account. The money I'd designated for Bryn's party. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I logged into the payment portal and canceled the transfer. Permanently this time. It felt like a small act of rebellion, a tiny reclamation of control. It also felt petty and mean, exactly like Bryn had said. But I did it anyway. I started the car and headed for the highway. The campus disappeared in my rearview mirror, and I told myself I wouldn't look back. But I did. I couldn't help it. Somewhere on that campus, my daughter was celebrating her graduation with her friends, drinking mimosas, taking photos, living her best life. And I wasn't part of it. I made it to Pennsylvania before I had to pull over. Not because I was tired, but because I couldn't see the road anymore through my tears. I sat in a rest area parking lot crying into my hands, feeling like the biggest failure of a mother who'd ever lived. My phone rang. I grabbed it, hoping desperately it was Bryn calling to apologize. It was Linda from the diner. I almost didn't answer. But Linda had covered all my shifts, and she deserved better than being ignored. "Hey, hun!" Her voice was warm, cheerful. "How'd it go? Did you get some good pictures?" I couldn't speak. My throat closed up. "Margaret, you there?" "I'm here," I managed. "What's wrong? What happened?" And just like that, it all came pouring out. The drive, the arrival, Bryn's casual dismissal, the fight this morning, all of it, in one long, rambling confession to a woman I worked with but barely knew outside of the diner. Linda listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, there was a long pause. "Oh, honey," she said finally. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what I did wrong," I said, and my voice sounded small, broken. "I don't know when I became the enemy." "You're not the enemy. You're her mother." She doesn't seem to think that counts for much. "She's young, she's stupid. They all are at that age. Your kids aren't like this with you." "My kids absolutely are like this with me," Linda said firmly. "You should hear the way my oldest talks to me. Like I'm the dumbest person alive. But they grow out of it. Usually. Usually? Most of the time. Eventually. Look, I'm not gonna lie to you. Kids can be ungrateful little shits. But that doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means they don't know how to show it yet." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But sitting in that rest area, alone after everything that had happened, it was hard to find hope. "I should let you go," I said. "Thanks for listening." "Margaret, wait. Where are you now?" "Somewhere in Pennsylvania. Rest area." "Are you okay to drive?" "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine." "I will be. I just need to get home." Another pause. Then, "Listen to me. You're a good mother. Whatever's going on with Bryn, whatever she's going through, that doesn't change the fact that you've done everything right. You hear me? I don't feel like I've done everything right. Nobody does. That's parenthood. But you showed up. You drove 18 hours to be there for her. That matters. Even if she can't see it right now, that matters." I closed my eyes. "Thanks, Linda. Get home safe, okay? And when you get here, you come straight to my house. I'm making you dinner, and I won't take no for an answer." I smiled despite everything. "Okay." After we hung up, I sat there for a few more minutes, trying to gather myself. A family pulled into the parking spot next to me. Mom, dad, 2 kids. The kids were fighting about something. The parents looked exhausted. But they were together. They were a unit. I wondered if Bryn and I had ever really been a unit, or if I'd just been fooling myself. I started driving again. The highway stretched ahead, gray and endless. Somewhere around Ohio, my phone started buzzing with texts. I didn't look at first. I was driving, and I'd learned my lesson about checking my phone on the road. But at the next rest stop, I looked. They were all from Bryn. Mom, you actually canceled the payment? Everyone's asking me what happened. This is so embarrassing. Can you please just send the money? We already have the reservation. Mom, answer me. Whatever, I'll figure it out myself. Thanks for nothing. I read them all twice, 3 times, waiting for the one that said, I'm sorry. Waiting for the one that said, I love you. Waiting for the one that acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, she'd hurt me. It never came. I turned my phone off. I didn't want to see any more messages. I didn't want to think about what she was saying about me to her friends. I just wanted to drive home and pretend this whole trip had never happened. But I couldn't pretend. Because this trip had shown me something I'd been trying not to see. My daughter didn't need me anymore. Worse, she didn't want me, and I didn't know what to do with that. By the time I crossed back into Iowa, it was Sunday evening. The sun was setting behind me, turning the flat farmland gold. I'd been on the road for 2 days, and I felt like I'd aged 10 years. Council Bluffs appeared on the horizon like a promise I wasn't sure I wanted kept. My little house on Willow Street, my shifts at the diner, my small, predictable life that suddenly felt even smaller. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a minute looking at the house. Thomas and I had bought it 23 years ago, right after we got married. We'd painted the shutters together, planted the tree in the front yard, built the deck out back. Bryn had taken her first steps in the living room, lost her first tooth at the kitchen table. This house held every memory of my family, but sitting there in the driveway, it just felt empty. I grabbed my bag and went inside. The house smelled stale. I'd been gone 2 days. There were dishes in the sink from breakfast Friday morning. The mail was piled up inside the door. I dropped my bag on the floor and walked through the rooms, turning on lights. Bryn's old bedroom was at the end of the hall. I'd kept it exactly as she'd left it when she went to college. The purple walls she'd insisted on painting sophomore year of high school, the corkboard covered with photos of friends, the volleyball trophies on the dresser. I stood in the doorway and looked at it all. This shrine to a daughter who didn't want me at her graduation. My phone, which I'd turned back on somewhere in Illinois, buzzed with another text. This time it wasn't from Bryn. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, this is Amanda, Bryn's friend. She asked me to reach out. She wants to know if you're planning to help with her security deposit for her new apartment in Boston. She needs to know by tomorrow. I stared at the text. Read it 3 times. 4. She hadn't called herself. She'd sent a friend to ask me for money. I sat down on Bryn's old bed, still holding my phone, and something inside me finally broke. Not the dramatic, sobbing break from yesterday. This was quieter, colder. The kind of break that happens when you realize you've been holding on to something that was already gone. I typed back, "Tell Bryn to call me herself if she wants to talk about money." I sent it before I could change my mind. The response came fast. She said, "You're not answering her calls." Because I'd turned my phone off. Because I couldn't handle any more texts that only asked for money. I didn't respond to Amanda. I just set my phone down and lay back on Bryn's old bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that Thomas had put up when she was 8. Somewhere in Boston, my daughter was planning her future, and I wasn't part of it. The question wasn't whether I could forgive her for forgetting about graduation. The question was whether she even wanted to be forgiven. I didn't go to Linda's house for dinner. I called her and said I was too tired, which was true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that I couldn't face her kindness right now. Kindness would crack me open, and I needed to stay intact, at least for a little while longer. Instead, I unpacked my bag, threw my clothes in the washing machine, and made myself a grilled cheese sandwich that I mostly didn't eat. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Bryn had done her homework, where Thomas and I had paid bills and planned our modest life, and tried to figure out what came next. My phone sat face down next to my plate, silent. No more texts from Bryn or her friend. No calls, nothing. The silence should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like proof. I went to bed early, around 8:30, and lay there in the dark listening to the house settle. The refrigerator hummed. The old furnace kicked on with its familiar rattle. These were the sounds of my life, the soundtrack to my solitude. I thought I'd fall asleep immediately. I was exhausted down to my bones, but my mind wouldn't shut off. It kept replaying moments. Bryn at 6, climbing into my lap to read books. Bryn at 10, crying because some girls at school had been mean to her, and I'd held her and told her she was brave and beautiful and perfect. Bryn at 14, standing at Thomas's grave, and the way she'd squeezed my hand so tight it hurt. When had I lost her? Or had I ever really had her at all? I must have eventually slept because I woke to my alarm at 3:30 a.m., time to get ready for my shift at the diner. My body protested every movement. My back felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to it. My legs were stiff and sore. But I got up anyway, because that's what you do. You get up, you go to work, you keep going. Rosie's Diner sat on the edge of downtown Council Bluffs, a chrome and red building that had been there since 1962. I'd been working there since shortly after Thomas died. 6 years of early mornings, of coffee pots and hash browns and customers who either knew your name or didn't see you at all. I pulled into the empty parking lot at 3:45, using my key to let myself in through the back. The kitchen lights were harsh after the darkness outside. Eddie was already there, the short-order cook who'd been at Rosie's longer than anyone. He was in his 60s, built like a bulldog, with a gray crew cut and forearms covered in faded tattoos. "Morning, Margaret," he said without looking up from the grill he was preheating. "Morning. How was the trip?" I busied myself with tying my apron. "It was fine." He glanced at me then, and I saw something flicker across his face. Understanding, maybe, or pity. Eddie had 3 kids, all grown, all living in other states. He knew about the distance between parents and children. "That's good," he said, and didn't push. Linda arrived at 4:30, breathless and apologetic about being late even though she wasn't. She took one look at me and pulled me into a hug right there in the middle of the diner, with the chairs still stacked on the tables. "Oh, honey," she said into my hair. I let her hold me for a moment, then gently pulled away. "I'm okay." "No, you're not." "I will be." She studied my face, then nodded. "Okay. But if you need to talk." "I know. Thank you." We opened at 5. The regulars started trickling in. Jim Peterson, who always ordered 2 eggs over easy and wheat toast. The Thompson brothers, who worked construction and needed enough calories to fuel a small army. Mary Beth Collins, who came in every morning after her overnight shift at the hospital. I poured coffee and took orders and smiled and said, "How are you doing?" Like I meant it. Like my insides weren't hollow. And you know what? After a few hours, it started to feel almost normal. The routine was comforting. This at least I knew how to do. Around 8, during a lull, Linda cornered me by the coffee station. "Have you heard from her?" I didn't have to ask who she meant. "No." "Have you tried calling?" "No." Linda opened her mouth like she was going to say something, then closed it. "Okay." "What?" "Nothing. Just maybe give her some time. Let her come to you. What if she doesn't?" Linda didn't have an answer for that. The day dragged on. My shift ended at noon, and I drove home with the radio off, letting the silence fill the car. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw Mrs. Chen from next door working in her garden. She waved, and I waved back. And for a moment, I considered walking over there and telling her everything. Mrs. Chen was 83 and had raised 5 kids. If anyone would understand, it would be her. But I didn't. I just went inside and closed the door. The house felt too quiet. I turned on the TV, some talk show I didn't care about, just to have noise. I tried to eat lunch, but nothing tasted right. I tried to take a nap, but couldn't settle. Finally, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to church. St. Mary's was a 10-minute drive, a small brick building with a white steeple and stained glass windows that had been installed in 1947. Thomas and I had gotten married there. Bryn had been baptized there. I hadn't been to Mass in months, maybe longer, but I went now because I didn't know where else to go. It was Monday afternoon, so the church was empty except for an old woman in the front pew saying her rosary. I slipped into a pew near the back and sat there, looking at the crucifix above the altar. I wasn't sure I believed anymore. I'd spent too many nights praying for things that never came, for Thomas to survive, for Bryn to call, for life to feel less hard. But I sat there anyway because this place remembered me. These walls had held my joy and my sorrow, and there was something comforting in that. "Margaret?" I turned. Father Mike was standing in the side aisle, a young priest only been at St. Mary's for 2 years. He was in his 30s, with kind eyes and an easy smile. "Father," I said, standing. "No, please, sit." He slid into the pew next to me. "I haven't seen you in a while. I've been working a lot. How's Bryn? She graduated, didn't she?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I must have made some sound because Father Mike's expression changed immediately. "I'm sorry, did I—" "She graduated," I said, and my voice sounded strange, distant. I drove out to Massachusetts to see it, but the ceremony was the day before I arrived. She forgot to tell me. Father Mike was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Have you talked to her since? She texted asking for money, for a party I'd promised to pay for. I canceled the payment. And how do you feel about that? I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Like the worst mother in the world. And also like maybe I did the right thing. I don't know anymore. Father Mike nodded slowly. Can I tell you something? Sure. I think we spend a lot of time in this church talking about forgiveness. Forgiving others, asking for forgiveness. But we don't talk enough about how hard it is. How it's not just saying, I forgive you and moving on. It's a process. Sometimes a long one. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive her yet. That's okay. You're allowed to be hurt. You're allowed to be angry. Those feelings are valid. But I'm her mother. Aren't I supposed to be the bigger person? You're also a human being, with feelings and needs and limits. Being a mother doesn't make you a saint. I felt tears starting, tried to blink them back. I've given her everything I had, and it wasn't enough. Maybe it wasn't about being enough, Father Mike said gently. Maybe she's just not ready to see what you've given her. Some people need to lose things before they understand their value. What if she never understands? Then that's her loss, not yours. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that I'd done enough, that the problem was Bryn's inability to see it, rather than my failure to be what she needed. But mothers don't get to believe that, do they? We always blame ourselves. I stayed at the church for another hour after Father Mike left. I didn't pray exactly. I just sat there in the quiet, letting the afternoon light filter through the stained glass, painting colored patterns on the worn wooden pews. When I finally left, I felt not better, exactly, but steadier, like I'd found some small piece of solid ground in the shifting mess of my emotions. The days that followed were strange. I worked my shifts. I came home. I ate, slept, existed. Bryn didn't call. I didn't call her. The silence between us grew thicker, heavier, until it felt like its own presence. Linda checked on me every day. Anything? Nothing. Give it time. But time didn't make it better. Time just made it more real. A week after the graduation, I got an email from UMass. It was about the student loans, Bryn's loans that I'd co-signed. The first payment would be due in 6 months, $473 a month for the next 10 years. I stared at the number, $473. That was almost a third of my monthly paycheck. For the next 10 years, I'd be paying for an education Bryn had used to build a life that didn't include me. I closed the laptop and didn't open it again for 2 days. On Thursday, 10 days after the graduation, my phone rang while I was at work. I was refilling coffee for a table of truckers when I felt it vibrate in my apron pocket. I glanced at it. Bryn. My heart did this stupid, hopeful jump. I excused myself, went to the back hallway by the bathrooms, and answered. Hello? Mom. Her voice was flat, careful. We need to talk. Okay. I need to know if you're going to help me with the security deposit. The apartment landlord needs an answer by tomorrow. Not, I'm sorry. Not, how are you? Just money. How much? I heard myself ask. $2,000. $2,000. I had maybe $300 in my checking account. I don't have that, I said. What do you mean you don't have it? You said you'd help me get settled in Boston. I said I'd help. I didn't promise $2,000. Mom, I need this apartment. It's perfect. It's close to where I'm starting my job and... You got a job? This was news to me. A pause. Yeah, I'm starting in July. Entry-level marketing position. That's great, Bryn. Congratulations. Thanks. Another pause. So can you help me or not? I closed my eyes, leaned against the wall. Can you help me understand something first? What? Why didn't you want me at your graduation? Silence. Bryn? That's not fair. What's not fair? You're making this about you. I forgot to tell you about the date change. It was an accident. Was it? What's that supposed to mean? Did you really forget, or did you just not want me there? Oh my God, Mom, you're being paranoid. Am I? Because you haven't called in weeks. You didn't tell me about your job. You only contact me when you need money. That's not true. When's the last time you called just to talk? Just to see how I was doing? Silence again. Longer this time. I'm busy, she said finally. I have a life. I can't call you every day like you want me to. I don't want you to call every day. I just want to feel like I matter to you. You do matter. Then act like it. My voice broke. Act like I'm more than just a bank account you withdraw from whenever you need something." I heard her breath catch. When she spoke again, her voice was cold. "You know what? Forget it. I'll figure out the deposit myself. I don't need your help. Bryn, I have to go." "Wait." She hung up. I stood there in the hallway, phone in hand, and felt the last thread connecting us snap. I went back to work, finished my shift, drove home. And that night, I did something I should have done years ago. I wrote her a letter. Not an email, not a text. An actual letter with pen and paper, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold before I finished. "Dear Bryn, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if it will matter, but I need to say these things, even if only for myself. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I couldn't give you the life you deserved. I'm sorry that we lived in a small house in a small town. I'm sorry that I worked so much that sometimes I missed your games, your concerts, your important moments. I'm sorry that after your dad died, I was too broken myself to help you heal the way you needed. But I need you to know something. I tried. Every single day, I tried. Every shift I worked, every dollar I saved, every sacrifice I made, it was all for you. Because I love you, because you're my daughter, and I wanted you to have chances I never had. I drove 18 hours to see you graduate because I was proud of you, because I wanted to be there for the biggest moment of your life so far. And when you told me the graduation was yesterday, that you'd forgotten to tell me, it broke my heart. Not because of the wasted trip, not because of the money or the time, but because it felt like proof of what I'd been afraid of for years, that you don't want me in your life anymore. I don't know when I became the enemy. I don't know when calling your mother became a chore instead of something you wanted to do. I don't know when I stopped being mom and started being just an obligation. But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep reaching out only to be ignored. I can't keep giving everything I have just to feel like it's never enough. So I'm going to give you what you seem to want. Space. I'm not going to call. I'm not going to text asking how you are. I'm not going to send money you haven't asked for or show up to events you haven't invited me to. If you want me in your life, you know where to find me. I'm in Council Bluffs, working at the diner, living in the house where you grew up. I'm not going anywhere, but I can't chase you anymore. I can't keep breaking my own heart, hoping that this time you'll see me. I love you. I will always love you. But I have to love myself too. And loving myself means accepting that I can't make you want a relationship with me. If you decide you want one, I'm here. Love, Mom. I read it over 3 times, changed a few words. Then I folded it, put it in an envelope, and wrote her address on the front. The UMass address, since I didn't have her Boston one yet. I drove to the post office and mailed it before I could change my mind. Then I went home, and I waited. The waiting was its own kind of torture. Every day I checked the mail, hoping for a response. None came. Every night I looked at my phone, hoping for a call. It never rang. 2 weeks passed, then 3. I worked my shifts, came home, lived my small life. Linda stopped asking if I'd heard from Bryn. Mrs. Chen brought me zucchini from her garden and didn't mention the fact that I'd clearly been crying. A month after the graduation, I did something radical. I took a day off. I called Linda and said I needed a personal day, and she said, of course, take 2 if I needed them. I didn't know what to do with a day off. I hadn't had one in months, maybe longer. I thought about driving somewhere, Omaha maybe, or Lincoln, but I didn't have the energy. Instead, I cleaned the house. Really cleaned it, not just the surface stuff. I went through closets and drawers, organized things that didn't need organizing, and then I came to Bryn's room. I stood in the doorway for a long time, looking at the purple walls and the volleyball trophies and the corkboard full of photos. This shrine I'd maintained to a daughter who'd moved on. I started taking things down, not throwing them away, I couldn't do that, but boxing them up. The trophies went into a plastic bin. The photos came off the corkboard. The stuffed animals that had been on the bed since she was 12 went into a garbage bag for donation. By the time I was done, the room looked bare, empty, but also cleaner. Ready for something new, even if I didn't know what that was yet. I stood in the middle of the room and felt something shift inside me. Not healing exactly, but acceptance maybe. The beginning of it. She was gone. Not just from this house, but from my life. At least for now. And I couldn't change that. I could only control how I responded to it. I could either spend the rest of my life mourning the daughter I'd lost, or I could start figuring out who I was without her. That night, I called Linda. Hey, I said when she answered. Hey yourself. How was your day off? Good, actually. Listen, I've been thinking. Remember how you're always saying we should go to that casino in Council Bluffs for one of their shows? Yeah? Let's do it. This weekend. My treat. I could hear the smile in her voice. Margaret Hale, are you asking me on a date? I'm asking my friend to go have some fun with me. Is that allowed? It's absolutely allowed. And it's about damn time. We went that Saturday. Saw a cover band that played all the hits from the 80s and 90s. Linda taught me how to play blackjack, and I lost $40, but laughed more than I had in months. We ate bad casino food and drank watered-down margaritas and stayed out until almost midnight. On the drive home, Linda said, "You know what? You look different." Different how? Lighter, like something heavy's been lifted off you. I don't know if it's been lifted, but maybe I'm getting stronger at carrying it. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Life went on. That's what it does. It goes on whether you're ready or not. I picked up more shifts at the diner, saved money. Not for Bryn's apartment or her loans or her next crisis. For me. For the first time in years, I was saving money for me. I started going to church again, not every week, but some weeks. Father Mike and I would talk sometimes about faith and doubt and how to keep going when you're not sure what you're going for. I joined a book club that met at the library on Tuesday nights. I'd never been a big reader, too tired, too busy, but I found I liked it. Liked talking about stories with other people, liked having something to think about besides work and worry. I even went on a date. Sort of. Jim Peterson, one of the regulars at the diner, asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime, and I said yes before I could overthink it. It wasn't romantic, not really. We just talked about the weather and his grandkids and the new bypass they were building on the north side of town. But it was nice. Normal. A reminder that there was life beyond the small circle of grief I'd been living in. 2 months after graduation, late July, hot enough that the pavement shimmered, I got a text. From Bryn. My heart still jumped. I hated that it did, but it did. The text said, "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. I thought about all the things I wanted to say. All the hurt and anger and disappointment. All the love and longing and desperate hope. But I didn't text back right away. I waited an hour, then 2. Not to be petty, but because I needed to think about what I wanted. Finally, I wrote, "I'm working until noon tomorrow. You can call me after that." The next day, at 12:07, my phone rang. I was in my car in the diner parking lot eating a turkey sandwich I'd made that morning. I looked at her name on the screen for 3 rings before I answered. "Hi," I said. "Hi." Her voice was small, uncertain. "Thanks for picking up." "Of course." A long pause. I didn't fill it. I'd spent years filling the silences between us, and I was done. "I got your letter," she said finally. "Okay." It took a while to get to me. They forwarded it from the UMass address. "Okay." Another pause. "Mom, I'm sorry." The words I'd been waiting for. But now that I heard them, I didn't know what to do with them. "For what?" I asked. "For everything. For the graduation. For how I've treated you. For being a terrible daughter." "You're not a terrible daughter." "Yes, I am." "I have been." I heard her voice crack. "I read your letter like 5 times. And every time I read it, I realized how shitty I've been. Bryn, no. Let me finish. Please." She took a breath. "I did forget to tell you about the date change. I swear I did. But you were right. I didn't want you there." The admission hurt even though I'd suspected it. "Why?" "Because..." She was crying now. I could hear it. "Because you embarrass me. And I know that's horrible. And I know it makes me a terrible person, but it's true. You embarrass me with your old car and your diner uniform and the way you don't understand any of my friends or their parents. And I hate myself for feeling that way. I hate myself so much." I sat there in my car listening to my daughter cry and felt 1,000 different things at once. Hurt, anger, sadness. But also, underneath all of it, understanding. "I was embarrassed of my mother too," I said quietly. "What?" "When I was your age. She worked at a factory, wore these thick glasses, had this accent from growing up in Poland. All my friends' moms were these put-together women with nice clothes and clean houses, and my mom was not that. And I was ashamed. And then she died when I was 24, and I never got to tell her I was sorry." Bryn was quiet. "I'm not saying it's okay," I continued. "What you did hurt me. A lot. But I understand it. And I forgive you." "Just like that?" "No. Not just like that. It's going to take time. And things can't go back to how they were. I know. Do you? Because I meant what I said in that letter, Bryn. I can't keep being the only one trying. If you want a relationship with me, you have to want it too. You have to call sometimes. You have to let me be part of your life. Not just when you need money, but actually part of it. I want that. I do. Then prove it. Another long pause. Then, okay, I will. Okay. Can I tell you about my new apartment? And just like that, we were talking. Really talking for the first time in years. She told me about her job, about her roommate, about the neighborhood in Boston where she was living. I told her about the book club, about my day at the casino with Linda, about Father Mike and the renovations they were doing at St. Mary's. We talked for an hour, then 2. And when we finally hung up, I sat in my car and cried. But this time, they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of relief, of hope. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. We weren't fixed. But we were talking. And that was something. Over the next few months, Bryn called me once a week, sometimes more. The conversations were shorter than that first one, but they were real. She told me about her struggles at work, about the roommate who never cleaned, about the guy she was maybe dating. I told her about my life too, the small, ordinary moments that I'd never thought she'd want to hear about. She came home for Thanksgiving. I picked her up at the Omaha airport, and when I saw her walking through the terminal, I barely recognized her. She looked older, more tired, more real, less like the polished version of herself she'd tried to be in college. We hugged, and this time it wasn't one of those half hugs. It was a real hug, the kind that says I missed you without words. "Hi, Mom," she said into my shoulder. "Hi, baby." The weekend wasn't perfect. We had moments where the old tensions flared up. She made a comment about the house looking dated. I got defensive about something small. But we worked through it. We talked instead of shutting down. On Sunday, before I drove her back to the airport, she asked if we could stop at St. Mary's. "Really?" I asked, surprised. "Yeah. I know it's weird, but I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately, and I want to light a candle for him." We went together, sat in the back pew like I always did. Bryn went up and lit a candle, stood there for a long time with her head bowed. When she came back, her eyes were red. "I miss him," she said. "Me too. Do you think he'd be disappointed in me?" I took her hand. "I think he'd be proud of who you're becoming. Even after everything? Especially after everything. Because you're trying to be better. That's all any of us can do." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat there in the quiet church, 2 women who'd hurt each other and were learning how to heal. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was real, and that was enough. Christmas came. Bryn stayed for a week this time. We watched old movies and made cookies and argued about whether the tree was straight, normal things, family things. On Christmas morning, she gave me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a check for $5,000. I looked up at her, confused. "Bryn, I can't." "It's the first payment," she said, "toward paying you back for everything. College, the graduation party you paid for even after I was awful, all of it. I know it doesn't cover everything, but it's a start. You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. You were right. I took you for granted. You gave me everything, and I acted like it was nothing. So I'm paying you back. Not just the money, but I'm going to be better. I'm going to show up for you the way you've always shown up for me." I held the check and cried. Happy tears this time. Grateful tears. "Thank you," I whispered. "No," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." That night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat in the living room looking at the Christmas tree. The lights twinkled in the dark, casting soft shadows on the walls. I thought about the past year, the drive to Massachusetts, the hurt, the anger, the slow, painful process of learning to let go and then learning to hold on again in a healthier way. It hadn't been easy. It still wasn't easy, but we were finding our way back to each other, one conversation at a time. My phone buzzed. A text from Linda. "Merry Christmas, hun. Hope you're having a good one with Bryn." I smiled and texted back. "The best. Thank you for everything." I set my phone down and sat there a little longer, in the quiet peace of Christmas night, feeling grateful. Grateful for second chances, for daughters who grow up, and sometimes, if you're lucky, come back. For friends who hold you up when you can't stand. For faith that wavers but doesn't break. For the long road home and the grace to walk it. Outside, snow had started to fall, soft and steady, covering everything in white. A fresh start. A new beginning. I turned off the tree lights and went to bed, and for the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully. The distance between us was still there. It always would be, in some form. But we were learning to bridge it, 1 mile at a time, and that was more than enough. After an 18-hour trip to attend my daughter's graduation, I found her, and she said mockingly, "Sorry, Mom, graduation was yesterday, I forgot to tell you." I just got in the car and went back home. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing when she found out I wouldn't pay for her party.